When Princess Anne arrived at the palace's winter reception, no one expected a storm to follow. But as cameras zoomed in on her hand, jaws dropped across the royal court. There it was, the Queen Mother's iconic sapphire ring, seen publicly for the first time in decades. But it wasn't on Camilla's finger. This wasn't an accessory. It was a declaration, and the message was chilling. The tides had turned. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The sapphire ring wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a legacy stone passed down through the veins of monarchy like a pulse. The Queen Mother had worn it in private moments of great consequence during war briefings, coronation ceremonies, and deeply personal milestones. It had not been seen in public since her death, assumed by many to have either gone to Charles or into a private royal vault. Yet there it was, sitting boldly on Anne's finger, as if it had been waiting for this very moment to return. For years, Camilla was believed to be the intended recipient. Royal watchers whispered of her growing obsession with the ring, of comments she made in passing during engagements, and of confidential murmurs from stylists about matching sets being prepared. Inside palace walls, it was all but accepted that the sapphire was hers to inherit, just another emblem to cement her influence. But no official handover ever happened. Instead, the ring vanished from mention, locked behind ceremonial protocol and discreet silence. Then came the reception, an event marked by frost in the air and tension beneath every royal smile. As Princess Anne stepped into the spotlight, her expression remained as composed as ever. But her hand did all the speaking. The room shifted. Gasps echoed from press rows and private courtiers alike. And in that instant, Camilla's gaze reportedly froze on the ring, her face clouded with disbelief. The symbolism hit harder than any spoken rebuke. It was an unspoken coup, and Anne had made her statement without saying a single word. Palace aides later revealed that Anne gave no interviews and made no remarks about the ring that evening, but her silence was deafening. Those closest to the inner circle described a strategic calm in her demeanor, a sense that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision but a meticulously timed gesture. Something far deeper had just been set in motion. The Queen Mother's ring, once a private legacy, had just been weaponized as a message, and Camilla, once untouchable in her position, now stood in the eye of a royal reckoning. For centuries, jewels in the royal family weren't just ornaments, they were declarations. Wearing the Queen Mother's sapphire ring wasn't just a fashion choice, it was a coded signal, and to those who could read between the jewels, it spoke of one thing. Power had begun to shift. The monarchy had its whisperers, and that whisper had now turned into a roar. But what if the sapphire ring was only the beginning of a greater message, one that had been building beneath the surface for years? Behind the palace walls, smiles often mask storms. For decades, Anne and Camilla have exchanged pleasantries while walking different paths, one carved by duty, the other by ambition. But insiders whisper that the frost between them never thawed. And now, with Anne stepping into the spotlight, old resentments are erupting in subtle but powerful ways. From the earliest days of Charles's involvement with Camilla, tension simmered beneath the surface. Anne, the unyielding daughter of a monarch who held tradition like a sword, had watched her brother spiral through scandal and sentiment. Camilla represented a disruption, an inconvenient truth that didn't fit into the rigid framework of royal obligation Anne had spent her life defending. To Anne, Camilla was not just the other woman, she was a variable that threatened to dilute the monarchy's steel. And as Charles grew closer to Camilla, Anne grew colder. That chill was never thawed, not even after years of official titles, public rebranding, and forced familial unity. The truth was, Anne had never forgotten Diana. Nor had she ever betrayed the quiet reverence she held for their late grandmother, the Queen Mother, who had openly expressed her unease about Camilla's place in the firm. Those two women, Diana and the Queen Mother, had been symbols of tradition, of grace under fire, of royalty anchored in sacrifice. And to Anne, Camilla was the opposite. Where Diana had wept in silence, Camilla had laughed in scandal. Where the Queen Mother had upheld crowns and courts with iron dignity, Camilla moved in circles that blurred aristocracy with opportunism. Anne didn't just resent Camilla, she represented everything Anne believed had gone wrong with the modern monarchy. The ideological clash only deepened with time. Anne, known for her uncompromising discipline and relentless service, viewed Camilla's relaxed charm and media-friendly persona as performative. Where Anne took the brunt of royal duties without complaint or fanfare, Camilla often appeared in curated spaces, never dirtying her hands in the unglamorous trenches of monarchy. Anne's stoicism was real, and she wore it like armor. Camilla, to her, played dress-up in the ruins of a crown still reeling from Diana's shadow. And, despite outward civility, the tension bled into the halls of Buckingham. Staffers noticed how Anne would sidestep invitations that involved Camilla. Royal aides privately admitted that Anne once blocked Camilla from attending a particular ceremonial engagement, citing protocol. But to those in the know, it was Anne's quiet way of drawing boundaries, unofficial but undeniable. And then came the ring. The Queen Mother's sapphire, now reborn on Anne's hand, wasn't just a moment of symbolism, it was the final punctuation on years of withheld acceptance. It wasn't merely that Anne had claimed the sapphire, it was that Camilla hadn't. A legacy had passed over her like a shadow. The Queen Mother's disapproval, once whispered behind velvet curtains, had found its voice in Anne's unspoken defiance. The ring was not gifted, it was claimed. And with it came the chilling realization that Camilla's climb had hit its ceiling. There would be no further ascent. Not with Anne watching. As Anne emerged from the shadows, her silent defiance carried echoes from beyond the grave, none louder than those of the Queen Mother herself. Just weeks before her passing, the Queen Mother reportedly made a peculiar request. "Keep it with Anne," she had whispered to her most trusted confidant. No one understood what it meant until now. The sapphire ring was not merely jewelry, it was a sacred torch, and passing it to Anne, not Camilla, would become a royal thunderclap decades later. Beneath the velvet curtain of royal formality, there existed a bond that very few truly understood, the one between the Queen Mother and Princess Anne. Where others saw Anne as rigid and unyielding, the Queen Mother saw strength, restraint, and honor. She understood the cost of duty, the pain of silence, and the importance of loyalty. Camilla, by contrast, never earned that same depth of trust. The Queen Mother had welcomed many into her orbit over the years, but Camilla remained firmly outside the inner sanctum. It wasn't personal, it was philosophical. Camilla's entry into royal life had been surrounded by whispers, scandals, and a rewriting of traditions the Queen Mother had spent her life defending. To her, there were lines not meant to be crossed, and Camilla had crossed them long before wearing a crown. After the Queen Mother's death, royal archivists discovered a handwritten note, small, folded, and stored among personal effects. It referenced a phrase that sent shivers down the spine of those who read it. There must be guardians of the old ways. One must remain. Anne knows. The note ended with a cryptic signature and the initials Q.M. While the public never saw this message, those within the palace understood its weight. Alongside the note, vault records revealed that the sapphire ring had not been gifted, but sealed, placed in an envelope marked for indefinite retention. Many expected Charles to open the vault for Camilla, to make the gesture, to bring her fully into the fold, but he never did. And now, it seems that decision was not made by hesitation, but by instruction. Sources close to the crown now suggest there was a pre-death promise between Anne and her grandmother, a secret pact, a moment held in quiet reverence, away from protocol and public scrutiny. Anne never spoke of it. She didn't need to. The Queen Mother had always believed in signals, in symbols, and in spiritual continuity. The sapphire ring wasn't an ornament, it was a shield, a safeguard, a reminder of who must protect the core when power wavered. And in entrusting it to Anne, she wasn't simply bestowing a relic, she was making a prophecy. So when Anne stepped out wearing that ring, it wasn't an act of rebellion, it was fulfillment. The timing, eerily precise, was no coincidence. The monarchy stood at another crossroads, and Anne, like her grandmother before her, was moving the chess pieces into place. Camilla, once assumed to be the recipient of such legacy, had been bypassed not by emotion but by design. And that truth, when uncovered, would ripple through the institution in waves that no crown could contain. But royal history has a cruel habit of repeating itself, and this time, the repetition came with devastating consequences for Camilla. She had battled scandal, shame, and years of cold shoulders to earn her crown. But nothing prepared Camilla for this. The moment she saw that sapphire, her composure cracked. Behind palace doors, aides describe an emotional landslide, a queen consort questioning her place, her legacy, and worst of all, her husband's silence. From the outside, Camilla had mastered the art of survival. She had weathered decades of public scrutiny, endured icy glances from senior royals, and reinvented herself in the court of public opinion. But all it took was a single stone-deep blue, and gleaming with silent judgment, to unravel the carefully stitched fabric of her confidence. In that single moment, captured in thousands of flashes, Camilla saw not just a ring but a verdict. The Queen Mother had spoken, and her voice now echoed through Anne's silent defiance. Insiders were quick to reveal what the cameras didn't catch. Within hours of the reception's conclusion, Camilla reportedly retreated to her private quarters in visible distress. One aide described her as devastated, unable to maintain the veneer of royal detachment. She had cried loudly, uncontrollably, and not just from embarrassment. It was a grief born from humiliation, from a creeping realization that she had never truly been accepted. Not by Anne, not by the legacy she had stepped into, and maybe, just maybe, not even by the man who had once risked everything to be with her. And where was Charles? Silent. Still. Some say he had known Anne would wear the ring, others insist he was blindsided. But one truth stands out among the whispers: he didn't defend Camilla. Not publicly, not privately. Their confrontation, as one source described, was less of an argument and more of a reckoning. Camilla demanded answers. Charles offered reflection. There was no resolution, only silence. A silence that felt colder than any royal corridor. Desperate to reclaim footing, Camilla leaned into the only strategy she knew: optics. In the days that followed, she scheduled high-visibility appearances, carefully coordinated with her media team to release images of warmth, grandeur, and benevolence. But beneath the surface, the palace machine was shifting. Senior royals began pulling away, subtly but unmistakably. Invitations were rerouted, engagements realigned, and the tone once polite neutrality grew into an unspoken consensus. Anne wasn't just respected, she was being rallied around. The queen consort found herself isolated, not publicly dethroned, but quietly diminished. Her power, once perceived as permanent, now appeared performative. And no amount of press coverage or palace photoshoots could cover the widening cracks. The ring had exposed more than a rivalry. It had exposed a fracture in the monarchy's heart, one that had always been there waiting for the right moment to split. But this wasn't just about Camilla's hurt, it was about a calculated reclaiming of legacy, and Anne wasn't acting alone. Whispers of a hidden royal alliance have surfaced, and its members are not who you'd expect. While the queen consort clung to ceremony, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Prince William formed a quiet triumvirate. Their goal? To preserve the monarchy's integrity by sidelining what they now saw as a dangerous influence. Camilla. For months, perhaps years, royal watchers missed the signs. But behind closed doors, a careful restructuring had begun. It started with meetings, held in the quieter wings of the palace, where Camilla was noticeably absent. While public schedules appeared unified, the real conversations were happening away from cameras, away from press briefings, and far from Camilla's circle. Anne had been the first to raise concerns not with drama, but with the same quiet force she had used her entire life. Camilla, she argued, represented a dilution of royal principles, a modern face with ancient controversies. And with the monarchy now on the edge of a generational shift, something had to be done. Prince Edward, ever loyal to tradition, began listening. He had always stood at the sidelines of power, but now, with both Charles aging and William rising, Edward understood that symbols mattered more than titles. When Anne appeared with the sapphire ring, Edward didn't just support the gesture, he reinforced it. Behind the scenes, he realigned ceremonial responsibilities. He ensured Anne's presence was prioritized. Every move, while subtle, chipped away at the illusion of Camilla's uncontested position. Prince William, once seen as the neutral bridge between all factions, began to shift. His tone, formerly diplomatic, grew colder around Camilla's initiatives. He stopped referencing her in speeches. He redirected engagements to Catherine or Anne. Aides reported a sharp pivot in his body language whenever Camilla was mentioned, and in private, he made it clear the future crown must not be tainted by controversy. He respected his father, but not necessarily the choices made in his father's name. In William's eyes, the legacy of Diana still echoed, and Anne's defiant symbolism offered a new path forward, one that the public and the institution could believe in. What began as quiet resistance solidified into something else entirely. The Windsor Pact, as it is now being called by those within palace walls, was never signed, never declared, but it didn't need to be. It existed in knowing looks, withheld invitations, redirected responsibilities. It was potent because it was unspoken, and its aim was clear: neutralize Camilla's reach before it became irreversible. Her family's growing involvement in court matters had raised red flags. Her influence over Charles's schedule, her sway in PR decisions, it had all become too much. The monarchy was shifting, and the pact ensured that when the dust settled, it would be Anne, not Camilla, who stood as the enduring symbol of royal strength. Anne's appearance with the Queen Mother's sapphire wasn't a personal rebellion. It was a coordinated act of allegiance, a silent call to arms, a moment that said, without question, we protect what matters now. But Camilla wasn't going down without a fight, and her next move would risk igniting a full-blown royal crisis. Cornered royals are the most dangerous. Sources reveal Camilla launched a private counteroffensive behind palace walls, leveraging old relationships, manipulating royal media coverage, and attempting to secure symbolic relics for herself. But her desperate campaign only fueled further backlash, and exposed secrets meant to stay buried. In the days following Anne's sapphire signal, Camilla moved with a fury few had ever seen. She summoned loyal aides, longtime press allies, and discreet advisors behind sealed doors. What had started as a quiet dethronement now felt like a hostile takeover in slow motion, and Camilla was determined to rewrite the script. Her first move? Reclaim control of the narrative. She initiated closed-door requests to locate other historic royal heirlooms, brooches, pendants, even ceremonial tiaras, items she believed could publicly symbolize her equal footing in the royal hierarchy. It wasn't about beauty, it was about power optics. If Anne could ignite a media storm with one ring, Camilla would build a fortress of jewels around herself to fight back. But optics weren't enough. She began placing strategic calls to media insiders, the same ones who had once helped polish her public image during the early days of her transition to Queen Consort. Carefully worded articles emerged, hinting at Camilla's deep emotional connection to royal tradition, trying to recast her as the overlooked yet rightful heir to the Queen Mother's legacy. Photographs were released of Camilla attending charity events with vintage accessories, subtle, but intended to stir curiosity. It didn't work. If anything, it backfired. Social media erupted with comparisons to Anne, whose silent stoicism only grew in admiration. Camilla's carefully orchestrated campaign began to look like what it was, an act of desperation. And through it all, Charles stood trapped. His silence was no longer seen as neutrality, it was viewed as weakness. Behind palace walls, the once unbreakable bond between him and Camilla showed visible cracks. He was caught between loyalty to the woman he had fought decades to be with, and the undeniable reality that the monarchy he would one day leave behind was now choosing to rally around his sister. Tensions simmered between the royal couple, sometimes exploding in whispered arguments overheard by aides. Camilla demanded clarity. Charles offered deflections. No reassurance, no commitment. Then came the confrontation no one dared speak of aloud. Anne and Camilla reportedly exchanged words behind closed doors, brief but blistering. What was said remained sealed in the shadows of the palace, but insiders confirm it left Camilla shaken. That same day, a leaked letter made its way to the inner circle. Authored by Camilla herself, it demanded a formal clarification of her status in the royal hierarchy, her titles, her authority, her rights to heritage items. But rather than bringing answers, the letter sparked alarm. It wasn't protocol, it was panic, and it confirmed what many had suspected. Camilla felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Within her team, morale crumbled. Palace aides described the energy as crisis mode. Every move she made was reactive, every appearance calculated. And yet, the public drifted further from her grasp. Anne, with her silence, had become the moral compass. Camilla, with her noise, had become the storm, and storms, in the royal world, don't last long. But as Camilla's grip slipped further, a revelation from deep within the vault would bring the palace to its knees. Just when Camilla thought things couldn't get worse, a sealed document surfaced from the late Queen's personal vault. What it contained shocked even senior royals. Princess Anne had been named as recipient to another sacred item, one that rewrites the narrative of influence, succession, and royal favour. The vault had remained untouched since Queen Elizabeth II's passing, guarded by protocol, guarded by silence. But with tensions rising and questions mounting over the Sapphire ring, senior aides were ordered to review its contents. Inside, amidst ceremonial relics, intimate correspondences, and private reflections, was a handwritten letter sealed in the Queen's unmistakable monogram. It was addressed not to the monarch, not to the crown, but to Anne. Its content was as startling as it was specific. In the event of disruption or deviation from our values, you must act. You have always been the monarchy's spine. This, I leave in your care for the moment the nation needs to remember who we are. Attached to the letter was a second heirloom. Unlike the Sapphire, this artifact had never been seen by the public. Passed down only in whispers, it was reportedly part of a private inheritance from the Queen Mother to Elizabeth, and now from Elizabeth to Anne. A token not of power, but of preservation. A relic meant for times of turbulence. And its emergence now wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. The Queen had chosen Anne not just as a protector, but as the final line of continuity between the past and the present. In a monarchy built on bloodlines and visibility, this was an earthquake. The shock of the revelation split through the palace like a lightning strike. Courtiers scrambled to adjust ceremonial plans. Internal conversations shifted. Anne's position, once seen as peripheral to the core power structure, now became central. The symbolism of the vault's contents elevated her status beyond tradition. It turned her into a steward of royal identity. News leaked almost immediately. The press erupted. Headlines declared Princess Anne, keeper of the crown's secret, and the Queen's final gift wasn't meant for Camilla. Anne's popularity soared. Her stoicism, once quietly admired, now became the gold standard of royal integrity. The fallout was immediate. Camilla, already wounded by Anne's Sapphire revelation, found herself further sidelined. She was reportedly removed from 2 upcoming ceremonial duties without explanation. Public appearances grew sparse. Even within palace circles, her name stopped appearing in internal briefings about the monarchy's long-term positioning. The ring had been a blow. The vault was a burial. And still, the public had yet to see the final twist, a farewell gesture Anne had been planning in secret. She rarely speaks publicly. But when Princess Anne took the podium at the Royal Legacy Foundation Gala, everything stopped. Her words were few but laced with purpose, memory, and quiet fire. And in a single sentence, she buried old narratives and crowned a new era without ever naming Camilla. The room had been filled with dignitaries, royals, and international press. It was meant to be a celebration of tradition, of history, of legacy. But what it became was a reckoning. As Anne stood before the crowd, The weight of generations seemed to settle on her shoulders, and yet she carried it without flinching. Her voice, steady but resolute, echoed the values many feared had been lost: restraint, discipline, and above all, duty. She did not address controversy. She did not stir scandal. Instead, she invoked memory. With subtle, piercing nods, she evoked the quiet steel of the Queen Mother and the enduring grace of Queen Elizabeth II. Legacy, she said, is not defined by popularity, but by permanence, by what survives when ceremony fades. The words hung in the air like a royal decree. It was a speech of shadows and truths, where Anne never mentioned Camilla, yet erased her in principle. She spoke not to exclude, but to realign. And as the crowd rose in a tearful ovation, the message rang louder than any accusation. The soul of the monarchy was not forged in scandal, but in sacrifice. Cameras caught William wiping away a tear, not for the spectacle, but for the quiet understanding that Anne had just redrawn the royal map. Camilla was nowhere in sight. Her absence spoke volumes. Whether she chose not to attend or was advised to remain away, no explanation was given. But no one needed one. The moment belonged to Anne, and the institution, watching from the shadows, acknowledged it. That night, headlines didn't speak of division. They spoke of reclamation. Anne reclaims the crown's soul, they read. Across the nation and the Commonwealth, public sentiment surged in Anne's favour. Social feeds overflowed with praise. Commentators declared her the monarch in spirit, if not in title. Even staunch critics of the royal family admitted this was leadership without ego, royalty without theatrics. And it wasn't just a speech. It was the culmination of weeks of silent signals, private power plays, and ancestral echoes rising from the vaults of history. Anne had not just worn the Queen Mother's sapphire, she had lived its legacy. With a handful of words, she reminded the world what royalty once meant, and what it still could. The monarchy, shaken and divided, found its spine once more, and its name was Anne. But behind the powerful speech, one final whisper remained: the question of Camilla's fate. There was no official announcement, no ceremony, no goodbye. Just a noticeable absence, a redacted schedule, and silence where her name once echoed. Camilla, once the centre of royal controversy and power, had quietly stepped back. And the crown? It had realigned itself around tradition, dignity, and Anne. Over the following weeks, the palace's shift became undeniable. Camilla's name began to disappear from event rosters. Engagements she once headlined were reassigned quietly, efficiently, and without discussion. Her team, once a bustling force within Clarence House, was scaled back. While no formal statement was released, insiders confirmed what everyone suspected. Camilla had been repositioned. No longer a queen in the strategic sense, she was now a symbol of support, a presence, not a force. Her public appearances grew sparse, her influence waned, and her involvement in high-level royal discussions dissolved into polite irrelevance. For a woman who had once held the throne in her grip, it was an echo of exile cloaked in courtesy. King Charles, once fiercely protective of her, seemed to accept the change with a quiet resignation. Those close to him described a man caught in the winds of transition, reflective, subdued, and increasingly deferential to Anne's rising stature. He stopped resisting. Instead, he began observing. In private, Charles reportedly confided to a longtime advisor that Anne reminded him of his mother, unyielding, composed, and always 2 steps ahead of scandal. And though it pained him to watch Camilla retreat, it was Anne's firm hand that now steered the monarchy's course, not through ambition, but through necessity. With Anne subtly assuming the role of silent anchor, a new chapter began to unfold. She took on responsibilities without fanfare. She mentored the younger royals not through lectures, but through presence. Her word became weight, her silence, law. The sapphire ring, once a family treasure, was now regarded as something more. A living relic, a symbol that bridged the Queen Mother's iron resolve, Queen Elizabeth II's quiet command, and Anne's embodiment of both. It was no longer just a ring, it was a royal compass, and it pointed forward not toward vanity, but toward valor. The institution, long accused of drifting from its foundations, began to course correct. It no longer pivoted around popularity, it returned to principles. Camilla's chapter had not ended in scandal or disgrace, it had simply concluded. Her presence softened into the background, her title still intact, but her reign eclipsed by a woman who never asked for the spotlight, yet became its only rightful bearer. The monarchy had chosen its center not by force, but by gravity. Anne had become inevitable. In the palace's quietest corridors, power never shouts, it signals, and when Anne wore that sapphire ring, the world finally heard it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.